that'll also tell you how old I am, that this scene to me, where they're trying to get the couch up the stairs and screaming pivot all the time, felt like what this entire 6-month period has been like. It's been 6 months since I was named the permanent VP, and we went into full-on COVID planning, and we had to de-densify campus. If you can advance the slide, Nate, thank you. We had to de-densify campus. We had a campus shutdown. We shifted everything immediately in the spring, and then in the summer, and then now again in the fall, to virtual programs and services with a hybrid component. We had to figure out things that we've never had to figure out before with pandemic resources. Lots of props to our student health service friends here, and a lot of folks in housing and dining, and leadership components throughout the division on how we stand up things like testing and contact tracing and housing for folks who may have tested positive for COVID or that were exposed. The mental health resources that we've had to come to develop and for this particular time frame. We've had to navigate major financial impacts. We navigated furloughs. We navigated hiring slowdowns. We've also been supporting our marginalized and vulnerable community members and reckoning with this collective understanding of racial equity and social justice, and how does this apply to our work, and how do we lean in even more? We're collectively navigating all of this change in the impact of the world and our own grief and loss around it, and connecting with students, again, students most importantly, and helping them find purpose and hope and planning for this hopeful return in the winter quarter. If we listed everything that we had been doing over the last summer, we would do nothing but have scrolling slides for probably hours upon end. And I think it's important, go ahead and advance please, Nate, for us to recognize this fact. As a global society, we're facing two pandemics, one caused by COVID-19 and the other by centuries of racial injustice. We are all experiencing a compounded collective trauma, and we need to name it, and we need to understand that neither our students nor our team are immune in this moment. This is going to be a long haul. I think it's important to say that out loud. I also think it's important to say, we don't have to do this alone. Our work is being seen. Our work is being valued in ways that I don't think the rest of the university fully understood before. Our partners know more about what we do now because of the work that you do and because of the things that we've been doing together than they ever have before. And please advance it, Nate. This connects beautifully, I think, to where we show up in our university's mission. University mission statement, if you've not seen it, short and sweet in this particular iteration, is that Northwestern's committed to excellent teaching, innovative research, and the personal and intellectual growth of its students in a diverse academic community. And I see the threads of teaching and personal growth and development, and we can make connections all through it, but we show up in the university's mission statement. Please advance, thanks. And you can see it in our own vision and mission. You see the full partnership to teaching, connected back to the university mission. You see it in our divisional mission with education and engagement. And because of that connection and because of where we are right now in the current realities, I think it's important to know that while we will begin a strategic planning process because it's time, and we have heard from all of you, many of you in a number of different spaces, that it's time for us to revisit some things, we will recommit to this vision and mission for this academic year as we ramp up strategic planning in late spring and in the summer so that we are ready for fall of 21. So I just want to make that clear. There's also another mission that we are working off of, and it's not an official one, but it seems to be a good rallying cry that the university has looked at for a student experience. And so Nate, if you can advance, thanks. And I am referring to this as the Northwestern COVID-19 kind of student experience mission. It's to create that engaging, inclusive, and meaningful experience for all students, both in and out of the classroom, in person and remotely, for this academic year. What that does is it acknowledges, I believe, the importance of the student experience for not just undergraduate students, but graduate and professional students, no matter where they are and no matter how they choose to engage. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt that Student Affairs has been leading that effort in a number of ways. And we started in the spring when we did such a quick pivot to a virtual environment. The thing we weren't afraid to do was to try different things. The things that we weren't afraid to do was to take feedback and make adjustments and advances and enhancements to the things that were and weren't working. And I am incredibly proud of this full team for their willingness to engage in that way. Please go ahead and advance. The other thing it's important to know is that our top 2 priorities, and here they are listed for you, have never been more relevant and never been more important. And so when we think about what the first one means for us now, you all can think in your heads about what this means in a COVID environment and in a time when students' mental health and physical health and their resilience and their sadness and grief and loss are so front and center for them, for their families, and for our work. And then when you see our second one and our collectively impacting the campus climate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we adjusted this a little bit. It said first generation, low income, marginalized, and underrepresented minority students. That last phrase needed to be removed for a whole host of reasons and replaced with our most vulnerable students. In this time, we have students who are vulnerable for a whole host of reasons. They may be immunocompromised. They may have compounding mental health concerns that are being exacerbated in this environment. They may be experiencing financial insecurity for the first time in their lives because of the shifting things that are happening and impacting their families. So leaning in for vulnerability, I felt was more important here in this space. Go ahead and advance. Thanks. In closing with my comments, and then we'll open it up for a couple of questions and then move into some additional updates. I have shared with many of you, I'll use my phrase again that Regan already put in there that she loved, is that 2020 has been a goat rodeo, and I think the goats are still coming, folks. And as we continue to navigate what all of this brings, and it's really easy to get down and frustrated in the moment. I've also shared though with folks that my history with religion is complicated. I celebrate and love when people can find their faith homes and they find purpose and meaning in that community and in their teachings and a whole host of other things. I wrestle with it. I think it's important that I'm transparent with that, but I find inspiration in these moments too. And I keep coming back to this perhaps this is the moment for which you have been created. 2020 has been incredibly hard. It will get harder. And the recovery after it is going to get hard as well. But what I want to share is that I really believe that every person in this community right now in student affairs is absolutely here for a reason and a purpose, and that it is connected to helping our students and our community navigate this time. I believe we are all quite possibly made for this unique moment in time, and I'm honored to share that responsibility with you. So with that, before we move into some additional updates and questions, I'm happy to entertain questions here. If people have anything they want to put in the chat, or if there are just comments that folks want to make. And I'll have to rely on Regan for watching that because I can't, can't see it. Okay, we'll go ahead then and move forward with the next update. I will turn this over then to Dr. Leslie Ann Brown Henderson, who's serving as our Executive Director of Campus Inclusion and Community and Acting Chief of Staff. She's going to give us an update on racial equity and social justice and the work that we are doing as a university and student affairs. So Leslie Ann, I turn this over to you.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Julie, for that information and context, and Dab for that beautiful land acknowledgement this morning. I am here to give you all just a few updates about what the university has been doing around racial justice and equity and what we as a division have been committed to. And I'm happy to take any questions that you all have. So as it relates to the larger university, you would have seen 2 emails come out, one about the social justice commitments and then an update to those. And there are a few things, many things that are moving forward, but a few that I'd like to highlight for you all. Next week, Tuesday will be the kickoff for the anti-racism training for senior leadership. So they will be undergoing a 3-hour and 2 kind of cohorts initial training with an outside consultant, and that starts next week. Morty will be present, the provost will be present, Craig, Julie, and so on and so forth, many of the VPs. So that's one commitment that was made, and we're moving forward with that. The other is that myself, Sekile, and Manuel are kind of responsible for moving this effort forward. We have some responsibility in that. And one of the things that we've done is to engage with the Office of Organizational Strategy and Change to serve as project managers of sorts to help us move this along. There's many stakeholders. Some of the commitments are lower hanging fruit, some are longer term, need longer term actions. So we've engaged with them and we've been meeting weekly about how a strategy towards moving these forward, as well as the third thing that I want to mention is connecting to previous recommendations. So one of the things that is true is that there have been a number of task force over the years. We've had the Native Inclusion and Outreach Task Force. We've had the Gender Queer, Non-Binary Trans Task Force. We've had the Black Student Experience Task Force, and a number of others. We've had the Life Cycle, and all of those have come with recommendations. And right now, all those recommendations kind of sit separate. So one of the things that we have a lot of energy about is to look at all those recommendations and start to create threads between them, as well as to look back at the Bursar's takeover, the demands of 1968, and how those connect back to what's happening now and what was requested then, and how can we move some of these things forward. So we are really working towards that and really thinking about how can we engage those who were parts of those task force, who might still want to be engaged in the work, and then how do we also include other voices. Students have a lot of energy around NUPD and EPD. And while those don't fall within the purview of student affairs, we certainly want to be a partner in how we're looking at NUPD and EPD and what recommendations come out of the review that's going to happen. Northwestern has hired Patricia Brown Holmes, who's an attorney with Riley, Safer, and Holmes and Kinsella law firm. And Patricia will be reviewing NUPD, and we'll be actively participating in that and trying to echo the voices of our students and make sure that they're at the tables as much as possible as well as we undergo that process. So that's just a little bit about the larger racial justice commitments from the university standpoint, but also us as a division, we have a responsibility. And I think in some ways we certainly have a ways to go, but in terms of Northwestern, we've certainly taken the lead in some of these things. So for SALT, the Student Affairs Leadership Team, we have dedicated since the end of spring 40 minutes of our weekly 90-minute meetings to do racial justice work. So what does that look like or mean for us? We have started to do identity exploration for us, talk about areas where we hold power and privilege with our identities and how those dynamics play out within SALT, within the division, within our leadership and supervision of the team, and then also how that trickles out through Northwestern. We've also talked about terminology. So what does it mean to hold power and privilege? What does discrimination, oppression, what are the differences? What does systemic racism mean, and how is that connected to anti-racism? So we've spent some concerted time, and we've committed to continuing to do this, to have conversations as SALT, to say that if we're saying that this is something that is a priority for the division and a priority for us, how are we making sure that we are doing the work? Knowing that each of us are coming to this conversation with different lenses, different experiences, and different levels of understanding. So we've been doing that. And then as it relates to the division, we're looking forward to creating a plan for the division as to how we can make sure that there's more support and scaffolding around you all as team members to be able to engage in this. So we're looking for the Student Affairs Council meeting that's going to be coming up this fall to talk about what does this look like? Where are the various entry points that already exist? What are things that need to be created to make sure that our team has the support and resources needed? And then we'll be working with the Professional Development Committee. Rob Aaron has been great at bringing in thought around what professional development ideas are already circulating and what we could be better supporting that group with so that they can support you all with programming. And finally, there's been resources in the snapshot. So those are just a couple of things from the university level and division level that we've been doing. Before I turn it over to Jeremy and Mona, unless there are some questions, I want to also just say to you all as my colleagues, what have you been doing? When we think about this moment, for some, it's been an awakening moment. For many, it's been our lived experiences and what we continue to navigate at Northwestern in our lives. So my question is, if since the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the many others, if you haven't done anything, if you haven't given it a second thought, my challenge to you is to think about why. What trainings, readings, webinars have you participated in? How are you taking responsibility for your own learning? How have you shifted your behaviors and actions based on the learnings that you have had the opportunity to be a part of? And finally, what conversations are you having within your home, within your family, within your staff to advance this work? We certainly, as your leadership team, as those who are responsible for the division, believe that it is within our responsibility to provide you all with opportunities to engage. And it's also up to each individual to take advantage of those opportunities and to also find ways to connect to the work. So with that, I want to leave you all feeling empowered, but also challenged that if you haven't thought any more about this, that today is the day and now is the time. Thank you all so much. Please let me know if you have any questions. And if there are no questions, I'm going to kick it back to Julie. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie Ann, so very much for that update, but more importantly for the challenge. I encourage folks we have been putting in the snapshot, and I really appreciate the folks who've been helping us collect the resources. If you don't know where to start, there are resources that have been put in every edition of the snapshot for several weeks now that you might find helpful. But Leslie Ann, just thank you again for the questions. I have written them down and I'm going to go back and also reflect on those, even though I know there's work that we are doing. I also now want to switch gears a little bit and turn it to the Return to Campus Winter 2021 planning. I want to acknowledge the work of a couple of our leaders here, Jeremy Schenk and Kelly Schaefer. Kelly has just rejoined us. I see a little quote in the chat from her, so welcome, Kelly. And their leadership in helping us get to this point through the summer and into the fall in representing the division at key tables when we're looking at university-wide work. We learned a lot of lessons in the summer, and one of those is that we need a much more coordinated and comprehensive approach to the work that we do around return to campus winter planning. We can't keep going into 29 different kinds of meetings and not knowing, left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing, things like that. So I think it's critically important for us to think about this in a different way, and the university has responded in that way. So I will turn this over to Jeremy Schenk and Mona Dugo to walk us through how the university is going to approach or actually currently is approaching our return to campus winter planning. So Jeremy, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Julie. And, all right, there we go. All right, go ahead and advance the next slide, Nate. So as Julie mentioned, the winter planning process is going to be much more structured than what we saw for in the fall planning. It's taken into account a lot of the lessons learned from the fall and building those into the winter planning efforts. It's also important to note that the structure does not capture visually all of the work going into winter planning. And so you're going to see the structure, but there's still so many people who are going to be involved in this process. And through this, you'll see it's the structure includes an executive committee. It includes winter and spring strategy groups with an advisory group that is providing some more advisory structure to that strategy group, and then 6 different work groups. And we'll go ahead and advance to the next slide, Nate. At that executive committee, you will see that it's made up of 4 of our vice presidents and provosts. So it's Kathleen Haggerty, Craig Johnson, Stephanie Graham, and JPK are serving on the executive committee that meets weekly. And they will be responding to proposals that will be coming from the winter spring strategy group. That group meets twice a week. And that group will be basically taking into account a lot of the processes and planning that will be happening at the work group level. And there are 6 work groups, and those are made up of academic planning, housing and dining, student life, testing and health operations, data and technology, and athletics. And Mona is going to go through the representation on those work groups here in a minute, but I will say that one of the things I'm really proud of is that Student Affairs has been at many of these different tables, and you will see that through the next slide that Mona will walk us through, and how involved we are in that process. And so each of those work groups has 2 co-chairs, and those co-chairs also serve on the strategy group. So that's a real high-level view of the process. But once again, it doesn't represent the amount of work that's happening at every level of our organization in Student Affairs, as well as across the campus. This is an entire campus effort to look at and plan for what the fall was. And I will tell you that we kicked this off, I believe, even before the first day of classes. We were already in conversations about what winter planning was going to look like. So we quickly went from fall to winter. And so we are moving very full speed ahead on this. And I'll turn it over to Mona to walk us through the next slide.
Great, thank you everybody, and good morning, Student Affairs. So we have, as Jeremy referenced, we have 6 working groups in progress, and we have a very quick turnaround time because winter will come pretty quickly. The 6 groups are looking at more holistically at what the student experience will be in winter, assuming that we're bringing back the 1st and 2nd year students or some combination, but really the goal is to bring students back to campus this winter, and we all hope that can happen. So we're looking at academics, student life, testing and health operations, data and technology, housing and dining, and athletics. And because all of these areas kind of overlap with one another, the structure of the sort of tiered level work gives us the opportunity to think about how these groups intersect and overlap with one another. And what we're really trying to do is look holistically at the student experience and make sure that we're prepared for students as they return in the winter. I think we do have a lot of lessons learned throughout the last quarter, and certainly as we think about student life and student experience, we want to think very holistically about that experience for students, keeping them safe through our testing and health operations, making sure that they have housing, that we have a plan for students who either are diagnosed COVID positive or get contact traced and have to move into isolation housing. And finally, just to think very holistically about what we're doing to provide some opportunities for connection and care of our students. And so while these are the members on the various groups, I think many of you should expect to get some outreach from members of the committees as we think about and want to hear from you about what's going well, what are your needs as we think about moving into the winter quarter, how are we going to support and take care of our students, what have you already been doing and what could we improve on? Those are the kinds of questions we're asking, and we look forward to engaging with you all around those questions. Thanks, I'll turn it back to Julie now.
Thanks so much, Mona and Jeremy. I think it's also important to know that many of you were involved in the work we did over the summer on the different the student life work groups that we had put together. That really became the foundation of a lot of decisions that were made, not just for the summer, but are now moving into this time frame. So I just think it's important to acknowledge that work that happened over the summer and how that has helped inform what we're doing now, and how it's helped to educate our collective community members about the needs of our students, all of our students during this time. So we're now to Q&A, and we have some pre-submitted questions, but I'd like to pause for a moment and see if anybody has any questions for Mona or Jeremy or Kelly, now that she's joined us here, because she, of course, was representing the division at a return to campus planning meeting this morning. And so that we can maybe get some questions answered for you. Okay, we will keep you all posted through regular updates, both either from your SALT representatives or through different types of communication on where we are in that process. So with Q&A, we had a few things that were submitted ahead of time. And as I look up here, I'm actually looking at those questions. In everybody's workstations, I feel like looks like mission control right now. And that's sort of what mine feels like right now. And one of the questions that we got ahead of time is, and it's a short one, but it's an interesting one. Any insight on the future of student affairs as it pertains to Northwestern? And that's a big, broad question. And I think about that question and I go back to some of the comments I made at the very beginning, which is really that I firmly believe that the university better understands how mission critical the work is that we do. I have heard our other senior leaders talk about that in other spaces, where we are and where we're not, like, so that they are representing us in other spaces in really positive ways, and appreciating and championing the work that you all are doing. And so I think the future of student affairs as it pertains to Northwestern is strong, really strong. And I realize that sounded a little like a presidential debate answer or a State of the Union answer, and that's not what I meant. But really thinking about that it is mission critical. People see its importance. They know the impact and the positive impact the work that we do has on our students. So that's a broad answer. Whoever submitted that question, I'm more than happy to have a more in-depth one-on-one conversation with you if we want to explore the nuances behind that. Happy to do that. We've got a couple of questions too about budget and the impact that spring, summer, and fall have had on the budget. I have to give major kudos to Lori Gordon, David Hartman, Sheila Driscoll, Michael Yoakum, Brian Drewley, and every financial administrator that we have on the payroll right now for the work that they continue to do to help us navigate not just this 6-month period of time, but the financial challenges that the university has had, and as a result, student affairs has had for the past 3 years. This has been a long lift for them, and they have stayed in it. I also want to acknowledge Vidal Redmond and the work that she's been doing with that team as well. And I know there are a lot more folks that are on the advisory committee and on the budget committee that are working in different units that are also helping different managers manage this time. When we refund housing and dining costs, which was the right thing to do in the spring, and it's the right thing to do in the fall for folks who had contracts and can no longer be here, that's a big hit to our budget. And I think anywhere between a $15 and a $20 million hit, depending on the year or the quarter. And so know, though, that this is known at the university level. No one is looking at us, pointing a finger, saying you have to figure out how to make that up. The university is really leaning into the financial concerns at a full institution level. And I think that has brought a little bit of relief, not just for us, but for the campus as a whole. Doesn't mean that it's not hard. We do have plans in the fall to do a budget series for the division. And so we will start with sort of some background and context on just budgeting in higher education in general. And we're hoping to have some folks that actually teach courses in that lean in and do that for us. And then we will bring the expertise of Lori Gordon, who I can see is getting all sorts of kudos in the chat right now. that we will work to have her brought in and then go through more of a budget overview for the Division of Student Affairs. And in that context, just get as many questions answered as we possibly can. So there's a question too about if there are going to be other furloughs or layoffs. I know that right now there are no plans for that. And I realize you heard me say right now, this landscape continues to shift. We are moving forward quickly and intentionally with planning for fall. And so I think it's important that we continue that planning to move forward and know that because of that institutional approach to our financial health, the university is doing everything it can to avoid that from happening. So, you know, there are other, as they like to say, levers that we may be able to pull. But, you know, we will continue to update you and keep you posted on all of this. Oh yeah, seeing some questions in the chat here. How is the division advancing equity and justice through the recruitment, retention, and advancement of people of color, especially Black folks, queer folks, and other marginalized folks? And I think that was Keith. Yeah, that's Keith. And so I think one of the best ways we are trying to address that right now, Keith, is through the HR strategy that's been developed. And as we continue to do the work around racial equity and social justice, more tightly marry those together. You heard Leslie Ann talk about a strategy. That is one of the fundamental components of the strategy for racial equity and social justice work. And we know we need to advance in that area. Again, happy to have more deep conversations about that at a later point, but this is absolutely the plan that we want to move forward with. Got a question, and this one's from Dav, it looks like. Yeah, regarding returning to campus for winter for staff who submitted work from home arrangement through Human Resources and Student Affairs, will they need to reapply for the winter? So the alternative work arrangement, or we're seeing it shorthanded to AWA, and I think that, Dav, maybe what you're referring to, is good through December. And so I think there are university decisions that need to be made about staffing levels and environmental things that will potentially shift. I think about things like, will schools reopen? You know, what are the treatments and or testing capabilities that we have? But right now those go through December. So I would imagine if that is extended again, that some type of reapplication would need to occur, but we'll get that confirmed and out to the division in an upcoming snapshot so that we can make sure we know and are getting the right information out to you all. Trying to check time, Regan, if you want to give me a high sign about when I need to stop answering questions here or move to re-answer them in a different way.
Yeah, I think if we have one more in the chat, we have time. And other than that, we will, as promised, address all of these offline.
Yeah, and I think there's a great question here from Samantha Conway about how are we planning to adequately focus on overall student wellness as a listed primary goal for the year with continued budget cuts occurring in all the wellness areas. Yeah, this is the really hard part of this work. And I think this is where we have to lean in and work with our content experts, right? With CAPS, with student health, with health promotion and wellness, with our Dean of Students team, and figure out what our full priorities are and what are the most important things that we need to do. And I think one of the things about our priority statement that says expand, I think expansion looks different. I think right now it really is enhance, and we need to figure out what it truly is that we need to focus on for our students during this time. I can say that because at university levels, people are seeing this as important, we have been able to make progress on backfilling positions that are specifically tied to wellness and well-being, and that's been helpful. And then we are leaning into conversations about what else we need. And so know that I'm committed to advocating for those as we continually move forward. So I think the other questions that are coming, I see Kim is asking about testing, about ramping up again at the beginning of the winter quarter after students return from break. I know the testing strategy is being thought through right now. It was one of the work groups that they have, whether it be because we have more people coming, or is it because, you know, we just need to do more testing, and what does testing availability look like? So they're pulling all of that into play and considering all those factors as they make plans for winter. So we got a couple of questions too. We updated folks on winter and spring plans. And I know that there is a question about athletics and competitive sports. We will get an answer for you on that question because it is not one, obviously, that we, you know, had a decision, a part in the decision on for the Big Ten. But we can get some resources or information to the person who asked that question. We will absolutely do so. So with that, I want to bring us to a close. The hour went fast, as it often does, and invite folks for, you know, that we've got some, I think, a lunch with the Vice President coming up, and we will put that into the snapshot for you all. We also invite you to reach out individually, and I will answer those questions as they come in. And in closing, just again say thank you very, very much for everything that you do. And I also just want to acknowledge that even over the past 24 hours, there's been a lot that's been happening in the world. People I saw were sort of going back and forth a little bit about, you know, the presidential debate that happened last night, and the challenges associated with that. And I use that term challenge intentionally and a little bit ironically, because it was a really hard space to be in for 90 minutes. And our students are experiencing that. We are experiencing that. And so I end with our phrase, I think of the millennia for student affairs, which is, please give yourselves the grace and space. Please take care of each other as you work doubly hard to take care of our students, and know that we can't do this unless we are all healthy and well. And I want you to make sure that you are prioritizing that for yourself too. So thank you. And I look forward to an amazing year, even though it's going to be a really challenging one for us all, but we'll be in it together.